respecting Senator Cornyn's prerogative, when he comes, I'll stop. Senator Murray, I believe, has come to the floor and reported that the Congressional Budget Office has just finished an evaluation of the Alexander Murray proposal to the United States Senate that would be for the purpose of reducing premiums and avoiding chaos in the individual insurance market during the years 2018 and 19. The senator from New Hampshire is a strong sponsor of that legislation. It is unusual in the fact that it has 12 Republican senators and 12 Democratic senators. Not many pieces of legislation come to the floor with that support. And the reason we accelerated work on it was that President Trump called me and asked me to work with Senator Murray to try to develop such a proposal. So now it's being considered by the President, by the House of Representatives, by other members of this body. But an important piece of information, as Senator Murray said, is what does the Congressional Budget Office say about the impact of our proposal on the federal taxpayer and on the consumers across the country? Now, President Trump has made it very clear that one thing he wants to make sure is that we don't bail out insurance companies if in 2018 we pay cost-sharing payment reductions, which are payments to pay for deductibles and copays for low-income Americans. I 100% agree with President Trump on that. Senator Murray 100% agrees with President Trump on that. We have language in our proposal to make sure that benefits go to consumers and to taxpayers and not to insurance companies. And we asked the Congressional Budget Office to review that, and this is what they said. Quote, on net, the CBO and the staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation estimate that implementing the legislation would reduce the deficit by $3.8 billion over 2018 to 2017 period relative to CBO's baseline. In other words, the Alexander Murray proposal would reduce federal spending by $3.8 billion. Not only does it not cost anything, it saves the taxpayer money. And then they said a second thing. CBO and JCT, and this is quoting the Congressional Budget Office, expect that insurers in almost all areas of the country would be required to issue some form of rebate to individuals and the federal government. Now, let me say that again. This is the CBO talking, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The Alexander Murray proposal, co-sponsored by a total of 24 senators, 12 Republicans, 12 Democrats, quote, CBO and JCT expect that insurers in almost all areas of the country would be required to issue some form of rebate to individuals and the federal government. So the Congressional Budget Office has found that our proposal benefits taxpayers and benefits consumers, not insurance companies. The specific benefit to the taxpayers is $3.8 billion. The exact benefit to consumers isn't determined yet because that will be state by state. Under our proposal, every state would come up with a plan to say in 2018, because of the cost-sharing payments, premium rates need to be lower than they're already set. And then in that state they would be, and as a result there would be rebates to individuals. CBO also found that there is a provision in the law for a catastrophic plan. That is a new insurance plan for people over the age of 29 that would have lower premiums and higher deductibles. But it would allow people to afford an insurance policy so a medical catastrophe didn't turn into a financial catastrophe. CBO estimates that making catastrophic plans part of a single risk pool would slightly lower premiums for other non-group plans because the people who enroll in catastrophic plans tend to be healthier on average than other non-group market enrollees. So a major objective, I think, of all of us is to attract more young, healthy people into the pool as a way of lowering rates for everybody. As a result of the slightly lower estimated premiums, CBO and JCT expect that federal costs for subsidies for insurance purchased through a marketplace established under the Affordable Care Act would decline by about $1.1 billion over 2019 to 2017. Now, we've already said what the Congressional Budget Office has reported earlier, that if we don't pass something like the Alexander Murray proposal, this is what happens. If the cost-sharing payments are not paid, premiums in 2018 will go up an average 20%. They're already up. Our proposal would take them down. The federal debt will increase by $194 billion over 10 years if we don't pass our proposal, due to the extra cost of subsidies to pay higher premiums. And up to 16 million Americans may live in counties where they're not able to buy any insurance in individual markets. Now, there are 350,000 Tennesseans in individual markets in Tennessee, and they will be terrified by the prospect of not being able to have any insurance to buy or by the skyrocketing premiums. So I thank Senator Cornyn for allowing me, and the senator from New Hampshire, Senator Shaheen, for allowing me to interrupt and make a brief statement. But let me go to the bottom line once more. The President has said repeatedly, Senator Murray has said repeatedly, I have said repeatedly, the Alexander Murray Amendment, the short-term bipartisan plan to reduce premiums and avoid chaos, must not bail out insurance companies. We've written language to make sure it does not, and now the Congressional Budget Office says it does not. It does not bail out insurance companies. It does benefit consumers. It does benefit taxpayers to the tune of $3.8 billion. That's very important information. I'm encouraged by the President's comment yesterday. He thanked me at our luncheon for working in a bipartisan way on this. I'm encouraged that Senator Hatch and Kevin Brady have introduced a bill recognizing the importance of continuing cost sharing. The ball's in the hands of the White House right now. They have our recommendation. They've made some suggestions. That's the normal legislative process. But I'm hopeful that something that has this kind of analysis, that it doesn't bail out insurance companies, that avoids a big increase to the federal debt, that makes certain that people will be able to buy insurance for the next couple of years, that begins to lower premiums, that almost all Democrats want and that Republicans in the House have all voted for once this year when they voted for their repeal and replace bill. Something like that, Mr. President, sounds like something that might become law before the end of the year, and I believe the sooner the better. I thank the President. I thank Senator Cornyn, Senator Shaheen. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Well, Mr. President, I'm delighted to follow Senator Alexander and was very pleased to hear the news from the CBO that this Alexander Murray proposal not only doesn't bail out insurance companies, as we all agree we should not do, we want to make sure that savings go to consumers, but also that it will save taxpayers $3.8 billion. This is a bipartisan agreement. I applaud the work of Senator Alexander and Senator Patty Murray to craft this bipartisan agreement to address the challenges we have in the short term with health care. Senators Alexander and Murray have given us a template for bipartisan negotiations, not just on health care, but on other critical matters that are going to come before this Senate: tax reform, reauthorizing community health centers and the Children's Health Insurance Program, reaching an agreement on the 2018 budget. These are all major issues facing this country and issues that we should be working on in a bipartisan way, because the Senate is at its best when we observe regular order, when we follow the committee process, when we work across the aisle and make principled compromises to get things done for the American people. I believe that's exactly what this health insurance bill does. In a Senate that's nearly equally divided between Republicans and Democrats, this is the only productive way forward for us to address the challenges that face this country. And too often we have seen people view bipartisan negotiations as a last resort, but bipartisanship should be the Senate's first resort, not the last resort. It should be the foundation of our work in this body. This is how the great majority of Americans want us to conduct the Senate's business. When I travel around New Hampshire, this is the consistent comment that I hear everywhere I go. Why can't you all work together to get things done for this country? This is especially true on matters like health care and tax reform, which affect families throughout the country. I'm encouraged that the Alexander Murray bill has earned strong bipartisan support, and as Senator Alexander said, it has 24 original co-sponsors. That number is equally divided between Republicans and Democrats. And this is a balanced agreement that's been negotiated by both parties over many months, and I think it's our best bet for stabilizing marketplaces in the short run so we can continue to work on long-term issues around health care. I'm especially pleased that this agreement provides for the continuation of cost-sharing reduction payments for 2 years. These payments are necessary to keep premiums, deductibles, and co-payments affordable for working people. Without these payments, the cost of coverage will skyrocket, insurers will leave the marketplaces, and millions of people will lose their health care coverage. I've been working on this issue of cost-saving reduction payments since earlier this year when I introduced a bill that would permanently appropriate funds for the CSRs. As the CBO said, the language in the Alexander Murray bill ensures that these CSRs are not a bailout to insurance companies, that they are a way to help people with the cost of insurance. They are orderly payments, payments that are built into the law that would go directly to keeping premiums, co-pays, and deductibles affordable for lower-income Americans. Both Democrats and Republicans recognize that these payments are an orderly, necessary subsidy that keeps down the cost of health coverage for everyday Americans. And as Senator Alexander said, we saw that these payments were in the bill that the House voted for around health care, and they were also in the Senate bill earlier this year. Now, in recent months, I've heard from hundreds of people across New Hampshire about the enormous difference that health care reform has made in their lives. We're a small state. We have just about 1.3 million people, and nearly 94,000 Granite Staters have gotten individual health coverage through the marketplaces. Nearly 50,000 have gotten coverage thanks to the Medicaid expansion program in New Hampshire. That has been a bipartisan effort with a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor to get that program in place, and it continues to enjoy the support of the Republican legislature and the Republican governor. Now, because of the Affordable Care Act's increased access to care, we also have nearly 11,000 Granite Staters who have substance use disorders who've been able to get treatment for the first time. New Hampshire has the second highest rate of overdose deaths from the heroin and opioid epidemic. And having treatment available through the expanded Medicaid program has made a difference for thousands of people in New Hampshire and their families. Hundreds of thousands of Granite Staters with pre-existing conditions no longer face discrimination, resulting in denial or sky-high premiums. These are important achievements, and this legislation will allow us to continue down that road to make sure people have health care coverage that they can afford. For people across New Hampshire and across this country, health care coverage is often a matter of life or death. It's also about being able to take a sick family member to a doctor. It's about knowing that a serious illness will not leave a mountain of debt. So I am very pleased to be able to join in the bipartisan efforts led by Senators Alexander and Murray to strengthen the parts of the health care law that are working and to fix what is not working. The other provisions in this legislation would allow states more flexibility through the 1332 waiver process. The Alexander Murray Agreement expedites waiver approvals so states can implement smart fixes to stabilize their marketplaces, for instance, by establishing a state-based reinsurance program. The agreement also includes a restoration of funding for open enrollment outreach and educational activities. And it protects core protections related to insurance affordability, coverage, and plan comprehensiveness. All of these changes are positive steps forward, steps that I hope will set us on a bipartisan path to strengthening elements of the Affordable Care Act that are working well and to fixing elements that need to be changed. I'm hopeful that the Alexander-Murray Agreement can gain the bipartisan support it needs to pass in Congress, that it can gain the President's signature, and I was encouraged by Senator Alexander's comments about the President's comments yesterday, because we need to restore certainty and stability to the marketplaces. Instead of partisan efforts to undermine the law and take health insurance away from people, we should embrace the spirit of the Alexander-Murray Agreement. Let's work together in a good faith, bipartisan effort to build a health care system that leaves no American behind.